Hi guys, Rob from Royal Bulbs. Today I'm going to talk about my incubator and incubating eggs in the tropics. Let me start right off by saying that ambient temperature here in the tropics is 29 degrees outside the incubator, and I want to incubate the eggs at 31.6. So my incubator has a little bit of a different job to do than most people's incubators. And the biggest problem that I have with my incubator is overheating. If everything switched off, everything dropped to ambient temperature, the eggs would probably still hatch. They will not die. At 29 degrees, they would still hatch probably about a week later than normal. The reason that I like to incubate is to make the incubation period more consistent. The eggs will hatch out after 55 to 60 days in the incubator, as opposed to who knows when if I leave them on the desktop. So I do like to use an incubator. My incubator setup is probably familiar to most people. It's a drinks cabinet, a converted drinks cooler. This one holds about 8 clutches. It's not a very big one. And all I did at the bottom here was simply disconnect the condenser and the cooling fan in there by unplugging the wires. So I still have the functionality of the drinks cabinet, and then any time I choose I can switch that back to a drinks cooler. I kept the light so that we can see inside the incubator if we need to, and I installed a small digital fan at the bottom here, which if I switch it on you'll see it switch on. You can see the fan has a cool little red light to tell me that it's switched on. And I installed that in my incubator because everybody does. And I found out with mine that the instant that I switch that fan on, the incubator overheats. The fan itself is a source of heat, which I don't need. And so I can't actually use that fan. The other difference in my incubator is there's actually a very small amount of heat cable. You see the heat cable at the bottom of the incubator? There's only about 6 feet of heat cable in this incubator. I don't need a great deal of additional temperature, so there's very little additional heat cable. The other thing that I do, there are bottles of water in here sitting directly above the heat cables, and the incubator itself is full. Even though there's only 1 clutch of eggs in the incubator, I do keep it full of other egg boxes ready to go. And the reason for that is I need the buffer of the water and the additional empty egg boxes inside the incubator to make sure that there are no temperature spikes and it doesn't actually overheat. The reason that it overheats is I have a simple on-off thermostat. Here's the thermostat at the top with the electrical cables, and I drilled a hole in the top of the insulation here to go down inside the incubator. So there's a cable for the heat cable, and there's a cable for the probe from the thermostat. And you can see the probe inside the incubator is sitting right here in the middle of the incubator, and I did have to play around with the positioning of that. And I also have 2 thermostats inside the incubator there just to give me a gauge on the temperature. A pulse proportional thermostat would be the best bet for this incubator because they're much more accurate, but unfortunately you can't get them here in Malaysia. They don't ship to Malaysia. Every time I go on Amazon or eBay, it gives me a message saying this product doesn't ship to Malaysia, which is a little bit disappointing. But we do have this digital thermostat here, which actually, when you play around with it, does the job quite well. The difference in this thermostat is that it has a set temperature, and it has a value that it goes up to before it switches off, and a value that it drops down to before it switches on again. So we know that if I set that thermostat to the temperature that I want, 31.6 degrees inside the incubator, that the residual heat in the cables when it switches off is going to overheat the incubator. So right there we know we're going to have to set the thermostat at a lower temperature. So what I've done with my thermostat is the difference between the on and off values I've set to as small a window as I can get given the sensitivity of the thermostat. So it's sometimes it's half a degree, sometimes it's 1 degree. In this case it's half a degree, so it's set to half a degree above, half a degree below the temperature that I've set on the thermostat. And if we look at the thermostat It's actually set for 29.5, and it will switch off at 30 degrees, it will switch on at 29 degrees. That value is not accurate, but that's the number that I need in order to get the temperature that I need inside the incubator. And you'll see I kept the digital thermometer that comes with the drinks chiller as well, and that says 29 degrees. But if I actually heat gun inside the incubator, you'll see that that is 31 degrees, 31.5, 31.5. So the temperature in here is a nice 88.5, 89 degrees Fahrenheit for those that work in Fahrenheit, 31.5, 31.6 for those that work in centigrade, despite the fact that this thermostat is set for 29.5. That's the temperature I need to set it in order for it to switch off before it overheats and to switch on before it gets too cool. If you set the thermostat too high, it doesn't switch on again at the bottom end of the temperature range. So you have to play around with those values a little bit just to tweak it. So this unit here has been switched on. When I first made it, I switched it on for a couple of weeks and played around with it, played around with the position of the probe, played around with the thermostat values to get it to operate within the temperature range that I needed, and that was just trial and error. It was accurate enough to do the job, but you can't trust the values on here. You always have to use the heat gun. And then before the eggs arrived, the incubator was set up a month before, and it's actually been switched on for a month in order to stabilize the temperatures and for me to gain confidence that it's actually operating in the correct temperature range. Inside the incubator, I don't need to add any additional humidity, and you saw from the egg setup video that I don't really do anything different with the eggs, except that we don't really have to worry too much about humidity. I've never had eggs dehydrate here, even when I've been a little bit skimpy on the amount of water that goes into the vermiculite. Don't have to worry about the eggs dehydrating, the humidity is quite high enough. So the biggest problem in incubating in the tropics is making sure that it doesn't overheat. Okay guys? Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.